We have a new winner today. Minnie Pearl is first in chat on this live stream. Minnie Pearl, I'm not sure if you know, but being first in chat comes with its privileges, or curse, depending on how you look at it. The first person in chat is the winner of the internet until our next live stream. And so you, unwittingly, most likely, are now the proud owner of the internet. We'll box it up and send it to you, and you're responsible for everything related to the internet worldwide until our next live stream. So congratulations, Minnie. With great power comes great responsibility. We have 4 minutes here, roughly, until we are expecting the judge back in the courtroom. But we're holding tight just for a minute, because last time they popped back on just a few minutes early to do a little bit of work before the jury was ready. So wonderful. Anyway, Karen, Miss Chris, hello. Waves to everybody. Waves to JB, by the way, up in Canada. Can't join us in chat, but I'm sure you're out there. Matthew Harris Law, our lawyers in the house. Wonderful to have him here. Appreciate him as always. Minnie Pearl, great. Thank you. Paula. Under what subject jurisdiction? Hey, I refuse to address that right now. I've addressed it in a written statement earlier, and I'm really not going to readdress it at this time. Minnie, you should feel special. Not many people own the internet, and you are the only one who does today. So congratulations. Abby says, when you get a moment, go check out Matthew's channel, which I just did on accident. Sorry about that. That's why my screen looks so funny. I'll fix it here while I bring that back. Okay, so not only did Abby talk in chat a little bit, but she was a little bit busy during the break, and she gave the hotline a call. We have a voicemail from Abby, which I'm super excited to play. She's saying, welcome back, everyone. We're going to play that here in just a minute before court starts. Oops, you need to see me some, huh? Yep, there I am. I'm back. Abby, yes, you left a message. I'm just going to give just a few people more a chance to jump on. We are actually live for the first time on Facebook at the same time, hopefully. But if the feed doesn't go very well on the YouTube side, then we're going to turn off Facebook and we're just going to focus on YouTube. Paula says, I subscribe to Matthew's channel. Wonderful. He has some great law information on there. If you are in Texas and need a lawyer, give him a call. If he's not your guy, maybe he can direct you to somebody who can help out. But it's wonderful to have him here. He says, I just finished watching the Absolute Clown Show from the morning. Holy cow, I'm glad I didn't have a reaction stream going while the reenactment was going on. Was that unbelievable? Here, let's grab the actual firearm, which we haven't checked to make sure it's unloaded, by the way, right? And, you know, odds are the police didn't check either with how much they've forgotten to do in this case. And let's reenact the shooting with the prosecution pretending to be the decedent. Oh, man, it was bizarre. It was bizarre. And then they finally switched to the other gun, and the prosecution keeps calling it an AR, which it's not. It's made by a different manufacturer. You know, it might be semantics to some of you, but it's a big difference to gun owners. It's not an AR. But yeah, it was bizarre. It was absolutely bizarre. Okay, so I'm trying to shrink down this window. Not sure how this will work. Well, we'll give it a try. Facebook says it's not liking the frame rate that I'm sending it. Not sure what it's receiving, but It seems to be working. Okay. Debbie, go ahead and please be seated. Please be seated. Thank you all for standing as usual as we come to order here in this court of public opinion, where I am not a lawyer. I just play one on YouTube. But we do have a lawyer in the house to keep us straight. So Matthew, thank you so much for being here. Let's actually get to this voicemail message from Abby. So let's see here, Abby. If you guys want to listen, this is Abby UK. This is one of our moderators. She's the one that posts all these great links, like this one I have up on the screen right now. Come on. Now, there we go. Where she says, call Recovery Addicts burner phone, 801-513-1160, and leave a voicemail or a text. Abby did just that during the break, so we're going to play that for you now, so you guys can put a voice to the name.
Hi, Recovery Addicts. It's Abby UK here. I just wanted to leave you a short message to say that I really love your channel and the effort that you're putting into it to make it so good. You have me and a few other thousands now addicted, so we'll be charging you for the bills when we need it. Carry on with the great work, and thank you very much for letting me be part of your channel. Hello.
Wonderful, Abby. Thank you so much. I am so glad you're a part of this channel. You are a huge part of this channel. Abby has been one of our excellent mods from pretty much day one. So grateful for her and all the work she does here. And she's on, I don't think you've missed a single live stream, Abby. Maybe I was wrong, but yeah, it's wonderful to have you here. Okay. Court is not quite back yet. I'm just keeping an eye on that. Let's reset this. There we go. Okay. We're just waiting for the judge to come back in the courtroom. For those that haven't followed, some of you might have been joining the channel and saying, hey, where's Sarah Boone? Sarah Boone, we were planning on having Sarah Boone today. The 7th was the date that the trial was supposed to start. It was supposed to be absolutely bizarre and crazy and all the wonderful things we come for. But Sarah Boone's lawyer, Mr. Bankowitz, asked the judge for more time. He needs time to review some more information. So judge gave it to him and said, we won't start till January 30th. January 30th, way out till then. So we're going to spot a tea. So we're going to have to wait till then for Sarah Boone. The suitcase murder trial, that's going to be at the end of January. There's a lot happening in January. There's a lot happening between now and then. So instead, today we're following this case out of New Mexico, which is the case of Dean Cummings. He is an extreme skier, and I know some people have given me some flack for having the that name up there on the screen, extreme skier, because there's nothing in this case about skiing other than the fact that the defendant at one time was an extreme skier. That's basically why we know about the case. There's a little notoriety there, but nothing else in this case has to do with skiing. Basically, all we have is a land deal gone bad, an argument over it, and it turned into a shooting, and one man is dead, and the other one's charged with his murder. The remarkable part about this is that the police, the investigation, even the prosecution has failed miserably in their job. Really, the police, there are mistakes made there. There's evidence that's not documented or that just showed up that shouldn't be included in the case. We've got a lead investigator that seems to neglect a lot of the things he probably should have been investigating during this case, during the 2 years that this defendant has been in jail without bond. And then the prosecution, they're more eloquent than Darrell Brooks, but they're doing about as good a job as Darrell Brooks did on his defense. They really have not been able to prove any points, almost hoping that the jury thinks that Dean has to prove his innocence, which he doesn't have to do. The burden of proof is on them, and they really have let the ball drop, so to speak, in that regard. So we're going to be coming back to that one in just a minute. Let me get all my cameras ready. Okay, I can show you the courtroom right now. It looks like we've got a little motion. I'm not sure why the camera zoomed out. It shouldn't be showing this when the judge isn't in the room. Probably just an amateur cameraman who's at work here. But now that the tea and crumpets and everything's been passed around and we've had hugs all around, Abby's so cute. Love the Brits. Yes, Abby, love your voice. I love the accent. It is wonderful. Oh no, you left us all standing when you left my poor toes. You stood during the whole break, Debbie. I apologize. Sometimes I forget that when I'm off the bench, you guys are all standing. I need a bailiff that can tell everyone to please be seated. Yeah, the prosecution, the reenactment, that is worth. Clip that, highlight that, post that to your page. That is bizarre, absolutely bizarre. And then halfway through the reenactment, after they're pointing the gun and fighting over the barrel, the judge is like, should we check and make sure it's not loaded? Oh, my goodness. So anyway, I think the most surprising thing today was that that Dean testified in his own defense. I did not think he'd be on the stand, especially because he has some of these conspiracy theory ideas, which he successfully avoided getting into. The prosecution tried to sort of bait him into that, talking about this neuro whatever, and toxins and poisons and things like that. But it didn't open the door. They didn't get there with him. And so his overall, he just did an amazing job. He came across so believable, so honest, so sincere, very willing to share information. There was not a lot of hesitation. Anytime he was asked a question, he wasn't trying to formulate in his head, how can I say this that will make me look the best? He just said it and spelled it out. And if he didn't remember, he said he didn't remember. And it didn't seem, there was nothing there that didn't seem genuine. So I think the jury believes him. If I was on the jury, I'd believe him right now. The most important thing is that he, in all of his testimony, all his story, his theory, okay, or his version of the facts, you've got your theory of defense, right? Everything that he's presented, he's basically saying this. The court's still panning around. If they're going to show something they shouldn't, I'm going to take it off the screen for just a second. I'm worried they're going to pan over and show the jury or something. Anyway, in all of this, with all this evidence that he's presented in his story of what happened, it's lining up perfectly with all the physical evidence from the scene, physical evidence that they found, they've collected. The only holes are the ones that were caused by the police or the investigators failing to follow up and test the clothing for mace and, check the mace to see if there was dye in it or to see if it was sprayed or anything else. Those are the only holes in the story. And you can't blame Dean for them not doing that, especially in some cases where he asked them to do that and they said they would and they didn't. Anyway, that's where we stand. We've got everybody. Let's go back and show you that we just panned out so we can see on the left, just above me, you've got Dean sitting in between his two defense attorneys. The one on the right, she is an absolute bulldog. If she gets out, maybe we'll hear her talking to one of these defense witnesses that they call, if they call another one. Can you guys zoom in? Is she watching our channel right now? Is that what she's doing? Is she watching Recovery Addict? Oh, looks like the judge is back in the courtroom, so we're going to get sound here soon. This is going to be very amazing. Buckle up, guys. It's going to be crazy.
The jury is present. Anything before we get started, Counsel?
Nothing from the state, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Bring in the jury, Loretta.
Okay, so no motions, straight to the jury. They did move earlier for a directed verdict. We got two of the charges thrown out on Friday, and then they moved for a mistrial earlier because the prosecution just blundered into areas they shouldn't have gone in front of the jury. So it's been bizarre. Okay, please take your seats. Best I could do, Bella. Thank you. That's awesome. We've got a carpenter's hammer and the scales of justice. So that'll work. That'll work. Book Hermit popping up from Australia. So good good day from Australia. Wonderful. Thank you, Book Hermit, for being here. I can't say that fast for some reason. I don't know if they fingerprinted the gun. That would have been interesting to see if they had the decedent's fingerprints on the barrel.
Motion, we call next witness.
The defense will call Debbie Dominguez.
Okay.
Debbie Dominguez. I don't know who she is yet.
Good afternoon. Let me show you, Mr. Dominguez. Raise your right hand. You swear affirm the testimony you're about to give the truth and the penalty of law.
Yes, I do.
Do I take a seat? Get close up to the microphone and speak out loud. Okay?
All right.
Ma'am, go ahead and state your full name for the record.
Debbie Dominguez?
And Ms. Dominguez, did you know Guillermo Arreola?
Yes, I did.
And how did you know him?
I was raised and grew up with the whole family.
Okay, so
We
family
lived right
friend.
next door to each other.
Okay. So he was your neighbor.
Yes, he was our neighbor.
I'm just going to ask you some very pointed questions, okay?
Okay.
Did you ever witness Guillermo Arreola spray anyone with mace?
Yes.
And who was it that he sprayed?
He sprayed my son Alonzo Dominguez. He sprayed my cousin Joe Chavez, and he sprayed me, but I turned my face and he didn't get me.
So he tried to spray you
Yes,
also?
he did.
Now let me ask, the mace that he used, did it have any dye in it that you were aware of?
No, none at all.
Oh, wow.
Now, when he tried to spray you and you turned your head, had you physically threatened him at all?
No,
Did Mr. Chavez physically threaten him?
no,
Did your son physically threaten him?
no,
Did you know Mr. Arreola to possess guns?
yes.
And let me back up. The incident that involved the mace, if you know, was Mr. Arreola intoxicated at the time?
You could smell the liquor off of him.
Okay.
I don't think they can testify if they don't swear to tell the truth. Maybe Matthew can tell us, but I think that's the case. He is a serial macer. That's what we've established now. Case closed. He's crazy.
Ma'am, do you know Dean Cummings?
No,
You've never met this man here?
no.
Thank you. I'll pass the witness.
Amen.
Now they need a sidebar. Can we approach? We've been looking everywhere for our case, and we haven't found it. Just watching the prosecution cross-examine Dean on the stand, you think of all people they wanted to question, it would be the defendant, right? So they can really trap him in his lies. And they got nothing out of him. Nothing at all. Oh, it was bizarre. Matthew Harris says, I say it, then it happens. I'm a fortune teller. What did you say happened? Bingo, right there. Let's see. Mr. Upper Torso says, I feel like this witness is just a little placeholder between bigger witnesses, and she's lethal already. Yeah, you can hear the effectiveness in the defense attorney's voice. She is so good at what she does. Not the sort of person I'd probably hang out with and just enjoy dinner and everything else with, but wow, I would not like her on the other side of the aisle from me.
Good afternoon, Ms. Dominguez.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to ask you some questions about what you just testified to, okay? You said that you've known Mr. Arreola pretty much your whole life. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
You grew up together, right?
Yes, but I moved away for 22 years and came back. He was already older. He was a younger kid when I moved away.
Okay. So let's talk about this incident that you testified to. Do you remember doing a pretrial interview with me on the telephone?
Do I remember?
Yes. Do you remember doing an interview?
Was it you?
Do you remember doing an
Clearly she
interview
doesn't.
on the telephone?
No.
You don't remember doing an interview on the telephone? Okay. Do you have memory problems?
No.
No, but you don't remember talking about this case on the telephone?
I remember an investigator calling me and asking me if I knew Arreola, if I knew the case about.
Okay, well, do you remember on July 11th of this year, on the telephone, you spoke with me, and I believe the investigator was also on the phone, and potentially an attorney.
And what is your name again?
My name is Jonna Walker. Do you remember doing a telephone interview?
I remember doing a telephone interview at 1 o'clock or something like that.
Okay, so now you remember that interview?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So do
She's
you
like,
remember
"Who
in
are
your
you?"
interview, you told me over and over that you couldn't even remember when this had happened. You couldn't give me a date.
I can't give you dates on it. I just know it was like 5 years ago.
Okay.
I don't know dates on all the stuff that went on.
Okay, but you remember the incident?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and this was July 9th, 2017. Does that sound right?
About.
Okay. And do you remember telling me that this was a verbal argument only before the mace came out?
Yes.
Okay, you told me that they had a little bit of a fight.
They were pushing each other like chest to chest, like that kind of a argument. A verbal, like
Who's
going
they?
in front of each other.
Was they your brother, Joe?
No, it was my son. It was my son, Joe, my cousin. Like he was right at us. Him and his cousin, I guess, that lived right next door, would come up and they would bump against each other's chests.
Okay, and that's Mr. Adiola is what you called him, his little cousin. Is that right?
The one that lived next door, I didn't never know who he was.
Okay, but you referred to him as his little cousin?
I think it's his cousin.
Okay, so it was Mr. Adiola and his little cousin,
Right.
and they were
Say
arguing
hello
with
to my little friend.
Joe.
Joe was to the side, my son here, and I was to the side here.
Okay, and you said that they were all pushing each other.
Like going in, when they're yelling at each other and verbally, and they're like right in each other's faces.
So
think you call
chest
it
bumping and
chesting
shoving.
up.
Would that be accurate?
Yes.
Okay, and you told me that this was a rumble. Do you remember that?
Well, it was like a rumble. They were like on towards back and forth on each other.
Okay, and you were out there with them in this rumble?
Yes, I was.
Okay, so it was your son, your brother, and you fighting Mr. Adiola and his little cousin in the rumble, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but your husband Mario was also there, right?
My husband was there at the beginning and he took off. He said, I don't want to get involved in this. He took off.
Okay, so then it was 4 against 2.
Yeah, and then Tanya was calling the cops.
Okay, so then 3 men, your husband, your son, and Joe.
My husband didn't even get near him. My husband was
But he
off
was
to-
there, right?
Yes, he
Plus
was.
you. Sorry. Plus you, so that's 4 people against 2, right? And you never told the police that your husband Mario was there. Is that correct?
Yeah, because he wasn't there when he took off.
Okay, and you never told police that Tanya, Joseph's wife, was also there, right?
She was up in the yard calling the cops.
Okay,
So
so
she
was she
wasn't
there
where-
in the rumble?
I don't recall her being there. She was further up calling the cops.
Okay. If she was there, would that be 5 people against 2?
Yes?
Okay. And then you said your son was maced and your brother, Joseph?
No, my cousin Joseph.
Cousin. Gotcha. Cousin Joseph was maced.
But I know him by Joe.
Okay. And then Joe went into the house and retrieved a pellet gun. Is that right?
I don't recall a pellet gun.
Okay. And he shot it in the air? Do you remember that?
I don't even remember that.
He shot a
I
pellet
just
gun in
remember I
there.
was holding my son down because I'm like, don't touch him. Come on, he's drinking and that's what he wants, because it's like scary when.
Okay, so he didn't shoot
I don't recall
at
seeing.
Mr. Adiola with
No,
a pellet gun.
I don't recall that at all.
So, and then Mr. Adiola shot the mace, right?
Yes.
And did it break up the rumble?
Pretty much, because then the cops started coming.
Okay. Was your son or Joseph transported to the hospital for this?
No, just the ambulance came and they went in and they washed out their eyes.
Okay. And this was just a verbal argument where you guys
Right.
were saying stuff
Shoving-
back and forth?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you yourself was saying stuff back to Mr. Adiola,
Yes,
correct?
because he tells you some ugly things.
Okay. So you said that he was carrying mace. Where does he typically carry the mace?
In his
Does
hand.
he have it in a certain pocket all the time, or
I
Right-
have no idea.
right
He
hand.
just pulled it out and I didn't see him.
have you ever seen him carry mace before?
No,
Okay.
this is the first time.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Church is giving us an update on the
Now,
Florida
when I
Matthew
use the
Terry
word
case.
fighting, the way that I define that is 2 people are physically hitting each other.
Right.
So let me ask you this. Were you fighting with Mr. Areola?
No,
Was Joe Chavez fighting with Mr. Areola?
no,
Was your son fighting with Mr. Areola?
no, they were just chest to chest.
Just kind of in each other's faces? Mm-hmm. Is that a yes?
Yes.
Just for this lady?
Yes,
This lady, just for this lady.
When this occurred, were you on your own property?
yes, when he came around, we were on my mom's property, yes.
Did you invite him into the property?
No,
Did you invite his cousin onto the property?
no,
Did you have a weapon?
no,
Did your son have a weapon?
no,
Did Mr. Chavez have a weapon?
no,
Did Mr. Areola's cousin have a weapon?
yes, he did.
No further questions.
Ms. Dominguez and Mr. Diamond,
Thank you.
step on the way down.
Okay, so what is left to do? Other than resign, if I was the lead prosecutor here, what is left to do in this case? Don't bring a can to a BB gun fight, says Mac.
Defense will call Joe Chavez.
Joe Chavez, okay. So we've got the testimony that he had a weapon. We're probably going to find out what that weapon is, see if he can remember the incident, if he remembers it differently. We'll see. Right to the point. Yeah, they're not wasting time. They are super effective. Tags, good to have you in here. It's awesome. Thanks for stopping by. You're welcome anytime. So this should be the person who was with Mr. Areola
Mr. Chavez, come up.
during the macing incident.
Standing, show your leader right now, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give?
So in New Mexico, for those that didn't know, currently it's the law that everyone has to wear a mask in the courtroom. That's why everyone is masked up.
The mic will speak out loud, okay? Okay.
Go ahead and state your full name, sir.
Joseph A. Chavez.
And Mr. Chavez, move that microphone a little closer to you.
Okay.
Mr. Chavez, did you know Guillermo Areola?
Yes,
How did you know him?
we kind of grew up together.
And as adults, were you still in contact?
No. Well, other than me being his neighbor.
Yeah, okay, and just to be clear, you said you were his neighbor?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you ever have an occasion where Mr. Areola sprayed you with mace?
Yes.
And did the
sprays
mace
everybody
have
with
any
mace.
kind of dye in it?
No.
It didn't dye your skin or your hair, or, well, pardon me, or your clothing in any way?
No.
Your hair. Oops. I'm sorry, sir. You don't have any hair.
At the time that Mr. Areola sprayed you with mace, were you physically threatening him?
No, we were just like in an argument.
Did you have a weapon?
No, not at that point in time, no.
Not at that point in time?
No.
Okay. At the time that Mr. Areola sprayed you with mace, do you know whether or not he was intoxicated?
Yes.
And was he intoxicated?
Yes.
And how could you tell?
The only time he was really aggressive was when he was intoxicated, which was pretty much daily.
He was an angry drunk. That's basically the testimony they're eliciting from these witnesses. A regular macer.
Prior to being sprayed with the mace, had you hit Mr. Areola?
No.
Had you threatened to hit Mr. Areola?
No.
Had you gone on to Mr. Areola's property?
No.
Where did this incident take place?
Took place on El Callejon, which is it's the road in front of my home.
The road in front of your home?
Yes.
Okay.
They asked this dye question because the state said that the mace had dye in it.
Do you know Mr. Cummings?
No.
You've never met him before?
No.
They did not test the canister. They did not test to see if there was
I'll pass
dye.
the witness.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to ask you some questions now, okay?
Okay.
You've known Mr. Ariola, you said you were best friends since you were kids, right?
Yeah?
Okay, let's talk about this mace incident. Do you remember when it happened?
Oh, it's been a while. I mean, maybe 3 years.
Would it surprise you
years.
that it was 5 years ago? More than 5 years ago?
Well, the frequency of incidents, I mean, yeah.
So
I
would
believe
it surprise
So
you
many
that it
mace
was July
incidents.
9th, 2017?
Okay.
Okay. Do you remember telling law enforcement that you were walking with your nephew up the roadway?
Yes.
Okay. And this is the Al Cajon Road, is that correct?
Yes.
And then you told law enforcement that Mr. Adiola started to taunt you and talk to you.
Yes, I was in my driveway when they were coming down the El Cajon.
Okay. So, Mr. Chavez, this was a verbal argument, is that right?
Yes.
And then Mr. Adiola pulled a can of mace out of his pocket and maced you and your nephew.
He was going to mace my wife, and I lunged in front of her because I wasn't sure what he had in his hand at the time.
Okay, so let's talk about this. You never told the police that your wife Tanya was there, is that right?
Well, they questioned her. She was there.
Okay.
This is so bad. This is so bad.
Law enforcement never documented that your wife Tanya was present. So let's talk about who was there.
Okay.
You were there, and
I
your
was
nephew
there.
was there, right?
It's a cousin that was there.
Okay. A cousin, not your
Yes.
nephew.
Right.
Okay. And Mr. Adiola was there? Who else was there?
His nephew.
Okay. And after Mr. Adiola pulled out the can of mace, you then went inside your house, correct?
Correct.
And you got a pellet gun, correct?
Correct.
And you shot at Mr. Adiola, correct?
Correct.
And you were not even involved in the initial verbal argument, is that correct?
That is correct.
But you decided that you wanted to go down and see what was happening at the end of the road and join in. is
No,
that
I
right?
did not go down.
You didn't go join in?
No, the argument and the
No, I
scuffle
could
came
shoot
to
him
me.
from the
I was
porch.
in my driveway.
Okay. But this was just a verbal argument at that point
Yes.
that you decided to join in.
No, I didn't decide to join in. I just decided to go out there to try to kind of, you know,
And then your wife Tanya also decided to join in, right?
yes.
Okay. And you jumped in front of Tanya so she wouldn't get maced, but you got maced.
Correct.
Was there pushing and shoving in this rumble?
Yeah, there was a little bit of pushing.
Were you pushing?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. You were just being pushed?
Yes.
Okay. Was Debbie pushing?
No.
No? But this was just words and pushing and shoving, right?
Correct.
Was Mario there?
I believe he was in the background. It all happened pretty fast and quick. I mean,
So it's you, your wife Tanya, right? 2 people. Debbie, her husband Mario, so that's 4 people.
her son.
And her son, so 5 people against Mr. Adiola and his cousin, you said?
His nephew.
Nephew. So it was 5 against 2. Would that
Correct.
sound accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And no one was ever arrested for this incident, right?
Correct.
There were no charges.
Correct.
And you were a willing participant in this rumble?
Are they trying to
What do
make
you
him
mean
look
by
bad?
willing?
He like
You
dove
could
in front of
have
the mace.
Not
to protect
joined
his
in
wife.
the rumble and the pushing and shoving, right? You could have just watched them.
Your Honor, I'll object. He's indicated that he wasn't pushing anyone.
Sustained.
Oh my goodness.
Did you join in the verbal argument?
Yes.
So you willingly joined into the verbal argument?
Yes.
So he deserved to get
this
maced.
would happen
Is that what you're
daily.
saying?
Okay.
It's a daily occurrence at this
Was
house.
this the only time you ever saw Mr. Adiola use mace?
No.
No, he did this all the time. He bought it in bulk and he sprayed everyone he knew. What is the prosecution doing with that sort of question? That is not the one. That's not the answer they wanted. They wanted him to say yes there. And this long pause,
Just a moment, sir.
they're trying to figure out what to do with this bit of information. Oh, man. The goal of any good cross-examination is to have the witness say the word yes to every single question. Yes, and don't ask questions where you know the answer is no. Man, this is bizarre. Can't wait till the 5G radio waves come into play. They burn too. I think we escaped that. If they didn't come up in direct questioning of Dean Cummings, I don't think they'll come up elsewhere.
You were never afraid of Mr. Adiola, correct?
Yeah, I was.
Do you remember talking to me on the telephone, doing a telephone interview?
Yes.
That was back in July, we talked about this case. Do you remember that, sir?
Yes.
Do you remember during that interview you told me you've known him so long that you never were afraid of him?
I was more afraid for my family. I mean,
Do you remember telling me that you've known Mr. Adiola so long that you're not afraid of him?
yeah, I mean,
No further questions, Your Honor.
okay.
Coyote, yes, he testified. He was the first defense witness, and he was awesome. Go back and watch the replay from this morning. It is.
Let
Watch
me
out at
ask.
2 times speed, but it is a great.
Did you and your family members gang up on Mr. Areola and his nephew?
No. His nephew, I mean, the reason why I went out there was because his nephew had a large knife on the side.
Hold on.
Well, I think he gets to explain it, and I think that the state has clearly opened the door.
Overruled.
Go ahead, sir.
I mean, I went out there to kind of, stop what was probably going to take place. I mean,
Well, wait a
But then
minute.
I ended up in it.
Hang on. Let me back you up.
okay.
You said the reason you went out there was because Mr. Areola's nephew had what?
He had a large knife in a sheath on his side
And why was that concerning to you?
because, I mean, at that point, I believe he was dangerous.
You believed
I
he was
mean,
dangerous?
Yes, because, the altercation came to me. They were obviously arguing and coming down the road, so this started somewhere else. But he didn't, he went out and actually was the aggressor,
Who was the aggressor?
Mr. Areola.
Okay. And you were asked by the prosecution if you ever saw Mr. Areola use mace a different time, right?
Yes,
And did you?
yes.
What was that time?
I've got a surveillance.
Objection, Your Honor. Can we approach?
She asked.
Overruled.
Go ahead, sir.
She's got I have a surveillance camera footage of him macing my dog.
And did you ever have any interactions with Mr. Areola where you were frightened of him?
There was a few, yes. There were several occasions where he would.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
All right,
so
I don't have any further questions.
They're trying to prevent some other things to come in.
Be careful on the way down, okay? Number 5.
Okay.
But that's devastating. If there was anything left in the state's case, it's just being whittled away to nothing.
Your Honor, I'm just going to
throughout-
see if our next witness is in the hallway.
All right.
Your Honor, I'm just checking in to see if you're ready for that directed verdict and just throw this thing out because we're wasting everyone's time here. He maced a dog. Yes, he's gone too far. Apparently he bought mace in bulk, like at Costco or Walmart or Sam's Club or something. Oh, man. I don't think the state had proven their case. I was just adding some background info. Right. Who in their right mind maces a dog? Yeah, and I don't know the situation. I mean, if the dog was attacking, I can see doing that. It's not deadly force. It's not like shooting a dog. But there would definitely have to be some level of threat there to justify that sort of behavior against an animal. Debbie says, I like this defense attorney. I usually can't say that. She is awesome. She is so good.
Our next witness had a doctor's appointment, and I did speak with him on the phone. He said that he was on his way. He's not here yet. We can begin with Mr. Brudenell, or we can wait a few moments for Mr. Klinger.
Let's take a break, and once you have either one of them here, let me know, and we'll get started. Let's take a break. Loretta, check, see if the middle courtroom is available. We're going to take them out to the hallway, and I'll check for you. I'll let you know. Okay. We'll take a
This judge sounds like a nice man. It's like a grandpa. Like, hey, do you guys, you want cookies back in my office? Have mace sales plummeted since? Probably. I think he kept a manufacturer in business. Yes, Bella, this guy's been in jail 2 years, no bail. 2 years of his life he's been sitting in jail waiting for this trial. Wow. Yeah, so Matthew, this question has come up a couple times, so maybe if you're available and can answer this, I've got a question. What is Dean's recourse?
Let me know when your witness is here. We'll get started, okay?
What is Dean's recourse when this all gets thrown out? Is it just like, oh, well, we tried. I guess you're free. Is there any sort of recourse he has, even civilly, about the 2 years of his life that he's been locked up with no bail because of this? Matthew's already pointing out some discrepancies in the chat and the viewer numbers. Some of you have lost the like button. It is there. You'll have to look for it. Sometimes you have to hide the chat to see it, but it's there. Ask a question, then object when the other guy asks the same question. Yeah, this is bizarre. This is bizarre. I love it. I absolutely love this. Thank you, Ann. Hang Fake 44 says he's going to get paid. That's what I want to find out. I just don't know, and maybe I'll have to look into New Mexico's laws specifically. But is there any sort of compensation, financial or otherwise? I don't think he's hurting financially. I think he has a good business that's profitable. Because, as Leanna says, sue the state. Is that an option? Abby's laying down the law. Hit the like or get maced. Kidding, obviously. But can Dean sue the court for time loss? Is there a settlement in his future? Wow. Or is it just sorry? No. Crazy. So we're waiting here for let me get my cameras lined up here. We're waiting for a witness to show up, right? We're waiting for the state's next witness who had a doctor's appointment, who will be here shortly. And we know we have two more witnesses, this one plus another one. I'm not sure if we're going to go all 3 days that they have on the calendar for defense, because they're really just moving through these witnesses and doing so in a really effective manner. I mean, just they get the information they need and turn it over to the state. The state botches it. They do a little cross, get a little more information, and move on. So next witness returning for medical appointment, therapy from repeated macing. Probably. Jared says, pay the man just to get it over with. We're done. Let's see. So those of you who missed the morning live stream, I go live every morning about 9 a.m. Eastern time. I spilled my water in my True Crime Addict mug all over my laptop. I've got a MacBook Pro here right in front of me here. Let me show you. this guy right here, and I dumped water all over it. And the keys that are lit from underneath are flashing a little bit. So I'm pretty sure that it's just a matter of time before this thing just electrocutes me and smoke that just comes up. That's all you'll see. It's probably going to die. But if it does die, everything, my actual stream, I'm not running, for those of you that live stream, I don't use OBS. I'm actually using hardware. I've got switchers that you can't see down here, an 8 and a 4 channel switcher, and that's actually pushing my stream straight to YouTube. But if this does die, then I lose just a little bit of data and videos and stuff that I have on there. But the stream can continue. I just can't manipulate it very much. I can even keep talking in chat because I'm on a different computer on chat. So that's where we're at. I will let you know if the computer dies. Hopefully it doesn't. I'm really hoping that this fan that I have blowing on me that is freezing me to death is somehow drying out all that water. And yes, I need to make sippy lids for the mugs for those of us who have trouble drinking. Yes. You need a photo of him pointing the gun at the blonde, 1,000 words. Let's see if I can find that, and I'll use that as the thumbnail for tomorrow, for tomorrow's video. Let's see. Matthew Harris says, unfortunately, I don't think there's a legitimate lawsuit against the state after the acquittal. Thank your government for sovereign immunity. Yeah. Even almost the negligence. I was wondering if just in this case particularly, the apparent negligence of the investigators and things like that. Still, yeah. Debbie, did I try the blow dryer? No, but I tried a vacuum. I'm worried about blowing the water down further into the system, and so I'm just going to use a shop vac and try to vacuum and suck water up through the keyboard, because that's where it went down. So I'm going to try that first, and then we'll go. Why are we surprised that Recovery Addict has a drinking problem? Coyote, hey, I've told you the story of my name. It's not what you think, I promise. Little Tommy Tippy Cups. Yes, I'll need one of those. Can someone update me on who's winning this court case thus far? I can tell you who's winning. It's all of us, because this is just pure gold. We are loving it. Unfortunately, Dean Cummings has sat in jail for the last 2 years to wait for this moment, to get vindicated in what is appearing to be a justified use of self-defense. His entire story sounds so plausible, sounds so believable, and every bit of it has lined up with the physical evidence that the state has presented. It just, yeah, Leanna, I'm thinking not guilty. That's where I'm sitting as well. We voted earlier on the previous live stream. About 90% of you said not guilty, 5% said guilty, and 5% were going for a hung jury. Crafty Cow says, put the laptop in a bag of rice. I would, but what would I live stream from? I need it. This is where I do my research. The B button doesn't work unless I push really hard. I think there's a lot of water under the B button. Barrel of rice, that should do it. And I think there should be some employment changes. Definitely, there should be some employment changes as a result of this, for sure. Oh, yes, he did kill someone. His story was it was self-defense, and it even answered the question, which I thought was a little weird, of why he had a loaded, for lack of a better term, assault rifle. It's a semi-automatic sporting rifle in this guy's house. Keyboard recovery. We need to rename the channel. Yes, there is no easy way to disassemble it. I might have to take it in and have somebody dry it. Hopefully, yeah, we'll see. We'll live stream from Rice Ground Zero. Yes, I see that. A little reference to my wife's channel as well. How could they not process the evidence for the prosecution? Leanna, I do not get it. I don't know why, especially when Dean gave them the clothing he had taken off when he had been sprayed with what he thought might have been mace or some sort of chemical. He gave it to him, told him where it was. He kept it all together and said, "Here, take this, test it." And they said, "Okay," and they didn't. And then they never sprayed the mace bottle. But then in open court, they said it has dye in it. But they've never sprayed it. They never tested it. They never even contacted the manufacturer to see if it had dye in it. They're just saying, oh, mace has dye, and he didn't have dye on him, so they wasn't sprayed with mace. But, yeah, okay, we're coming back right here. Let's see. There we go.
May be seated. Please go. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give the truth on the penalty of law.
I do.
Go ahead and take a seat and get closer to the microphone. Speak up loudly.
Sir, can you go ahead and state your full name for the record?
Sure. My full name is Carl David Klingler.
I think he ate the
And
microphone.
how do you spell your first name?
Let me turn that down.
Carl with a K, K-A-R-L.
And how did you spell your last name?
K-L-I-N-G-L-E-R.
Wow, that blew my ears off.
Mr. Klingler, did you ever know a man named Guillermo Arreola?
I had a couple of interactions with him, yes.
I am going to ask you to discuss with us the
I'm sorry, Matthew.
time that you were in front of the Chavez residence.
Yes. And that was, to be sure, the only time I really interacted with him.
Okay. So the other time you saw him, but you didn't actually interact with him. Is that right?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. So this time that you had an interaction with him, that's what we're going to talk about.
Hey, Mangy, reach out to me on my hotline number. I'd love to talk
What
to
were
you.
you doing
Give
at
me
the
some
Chavez
tips.
residence?
I had arrived there to, I think that time, I had responded to a Craigslist ad a few weeks before, and I'd met Joe and Tanya, and then that time I think I was there to drop something off. I think I was there to actually to lend Joe some insulin, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Joe has diabetes, and I have diabetes.
Okay. And
Lend him insulin.
You
Wow.
initially responded to a Craigslist ad because you were purchasing some medical equipment, right?
Exactly, yes.
So Joe and Tanya Chavez at this point in time, it doesn't sound like they were close friends of yours.
No,
These were just folks that you were having a transaction with.
yes.
So when you arrived at their residence that day, were you able to enter their driveway?
No, they kept their gate closed, and Tanya had asked me to immediately let her know when I arrived there, because she wanted to come out, open up the gate, and let me into the yard so that I could park inside the yard because of some of their previous experiences with their neighbor.
Okay. So when you arrived at the closed gate, what did you do?
So it was just right around sunset, and I turned the car off and turned my lights off, and began texting Tanya just to let her know that I was there. And then
And what happened then?
well, what happened then was that somebody began banging on my car with a hammer.
With a what?
With a hammer.
Okay.
Jeez, with a what?
I looked in the rearview mirror, and somebody was just walking along my car, banging it with a hammer, and I knew immediately who it was because Tanya had described him to me.
He'll be
And
the guy
you had
that hits your car with a
never had an
hammer.
interaction with that man?
No,
You didn't have any previous beef with him?
nope. We had never met. Nope, I'd never had any interaction. The last time I had been at the Chavez residence, I had seen him listening through the
There's an
fence.
objection.
Your Honor, I think this is going to go to a 404A incident if we can approach.
I don't know what she's referring to, but I'm just gonna move on.
Okay.
So there's something they're not supposed to bring up. He was getting close to that.
So when you realized that there was someone banging on your car with a hammer, and let me ask you, were they banging on your car with the hammer lightly or hard?
I'd say about medium. It was about, it was enough to make a dent, or to make dents. It left a series of dents down my car, and it was enough to break he broke my tail light as well.
Broke your tail light.
Uh-huh.
So what did you do?
Well, I jumped out. I got out, and
Careful,
I was
he's got mace.
trying not to lose my temper, and I said, "Why are you doing that?"
Now,
Yeah.
without saying what he said in response, Did he
That's
do
hearsay.
anything at that point in time?
Without saying what he said in response,
Physically, what did he do?
he did not do anything at that moment. Or, he just continued to speak to me and hold the hammer.
Did he threaten you with the hammer?
A couple of sentences later, he did. His initial response was, I'm just teaching.
Yep. Yeah, you can't say that.
When you say that he threatened you with the hammer, just talk to us physically about what he did.
Okay. Well, he brought the hammer back and said,
Objection, hearsay.
Well, I think it's not being offered for the truth. I think it just goes to his state of mind.
It is being offered.
It is not being offered for the truth.
Overruled. Just that brief.
Go ahead, sir. So he pulled the hammer back, and what was that sentence he said?
when I turned to him, he could see that, I turned and looked at him, and he said, I will fuck you up.
Okay. All right. I'll stop you right there. I'll
That's
pass the
enough.
witness.
Okay, prosecution, what are you going to turn this witness into? Are you going to attack him because he didn't donate to the 4-H club?
Good afternoon, sir.
Or
Good
he
afternoon.
forgot his wife's anniversary?
So
Where are they going to go with
let's
this?
talk about this incident with the hammer. This was in 2018. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Audiolo, was he walking around your vehicle making dents or only at the back of the vehicle?
He was walking up the driver's side. He just
So-
made a succession of dents up my driver's side.
But not only in the back of the vehicle?
We're going to need this
Correct.
reenacted for sure. Does somebody have a hammer for the court?
He said he was teaching me a lesson initially.
Okay, sir.
They asked for
Remember
hearsay?
telling law enforcement that he had hit the back of your vehicle?
Yes.
Yes, that's where the
So you
tail
never
light
said
is.
all up the driver's side. You said the back of your vehicle. Is that correct?
He started with the tail light and
I'm
then worked his
asking
way
you,
up.
do you remember telling law enforcement that he hit the back of your vehicle? You never told them all around your vehicle.
I'll take your word for it.
May I approach?
Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. He said he'll take your word for it. You don't get to refresh. Objection.
Sustained.
Do you remember doing a statement for law enforcement?
I do.
Do you remember in your written statement saying that he pounded on the back of your vehicle?
I think that might have been subject to their interpretation because it turned out later that there was
Okay,
something else
let
they
me
wrote
stop you
down.
there,
Yeah,
sir.
let me stop you before you
Wait a minute.
completely destroy our
He
case.
gets to answer her question. She doesn't get to just
He
cut
did
her off.
answer the question. Now he's going to answer.
Let's move on.
Oh, man. They're trying to
Were you
very
backing
carefully
out
craft
of
something.
Joe and Tanya's driveway?
No.
No, you weren't backing out and almost hit Mr. Audiola with your Jeep.
Oh, no, I had just arrived and the car was turned off.
Do you remember telling law enforcement that you were backing up and that you were looking and there were some items back blocking your view? There were signs blocking your view. Do you remember saying that?
You guys are
I
the
never
best.
would have said that.
Do you remember doing a written statement to law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay. Would looking at that witness statement refresh your memory?
Well, what I understand is that law
Sir, the
enforcement,
question is would looking at your witness statement refresh your memory what you said?
certainly.
Okay, so this is where they're going to try to catch him because he's testified to one thing, and he probably, back when it happened, either left some details out or had some other details that are different than what he said here. It doesn't change the fact that I think it's pretty clear that we know that this guy used a hammer on his car. This is the longest I've ever seen the opposing bench in this case review the information. This statement that was given to the police officer. I'm not sure if this is a police report or if he wrote the statement for the officer. So that'll be interesting too. If the officer sort of summarized how the interview went. Let's see. They're going to approach.
Let's approach real quick.
Let's approach real quick. Yeah, let's approach real quick. Prosecutor, what are you doing? Might as well. The mockery bar has been considerably lowered today. Yes. We're poking some fun here. I'm crying over here. This is good. Shane, it's so good to have you here. We were worried about you on the earlier live stream. Glad you could catch up with us again. Somebody was mentioned earlier that, who was it? They said something that said, I love the little graphics we used at the beginning. Let's see, who said that? Well, those graphics are courtesy of one of your fellow subscribers. Stephen Lee sends that one, and let me show you what it is here, the one we're talking about. It's right. Boom, there, and I'll turn me off so you can see it. He came up, oh, and that one as well, sorry. He came up with that himself and drew that for you, and said I could use that, so I really appreciate that. It's really awesome. Okay, so they're still up talking to the judge here, waiting for the sidebar. I'm going to bring my graphics back on so you can see what's happening. There we go. This defense lawyer is so good at what she does. So good. Only admissible if he wrote it. If notes by officer should not be admissible. They might still be able to bring it up and say, you know, is there any reason why he would have written this? You know, if you hadn't said that type thing. I mean, generally officers aren't trying to lie on their reports. They're writing down all the details as best they can. Yes, we're going to cancel the search party for Shane O'Neill. He has been found safe. I won't say if we paid the bounty to the kidnappers, but he's back with us. Let's just leave it there. Busy the last few days, less time now. Shane, you're amazing. Appreciate you being here. See how the mug isn't overturned, though. Right. AJ, too soon, really. No, I'm actually hopeful that this computer will survive. I really am.
Just a couple of questions for you further, Mr. Klingler, I apologize. I know I got it wrong before.
You got a lot of things wrong.
You said that Mr. Adiola motioned to the jury how he had the hammer in his hand, correct?
Yes.
And he was about 4 feet away from you when he did that?
I say more like 6.
Okay.
I remember the whole thing pretty clearly.
Okay. And
His mask is rubbing against the microphone.
you
It's
believe
bugging
that
me.
this incident was an opportunity to do Joe and Tanya a favor, right?
They had told me, or
Is this is a yes or no question, sir?
Object to the form of question. I don't understand what she's asking, and I don't think he does either.
Okay, I'll ask it again.
I'll ask the same thing
Did you
again.
believe that this was an opportunity to do Joe and Tanya a favor?
Exact same
What
question.
was an opportunity?
That's my question. What opportunity?
Was calling law enforcement an opportunity for you to do Joe and Tanya a favor?
yes, they had. There is some background to that. If you would allow me to
No,
go into
sir.
it.
No, we don't want that. We'll destroy our case. We just want to use that yes and then move on.
And during
They'll get it on redirect. We'll get that answer. Yes, some people say the decedent's name.
no further questions, Judge.
Okay, so she lost that the little sidebar.
Mr. Klingler, what's the background on you
Here's the background.
wanting to do Joe and Tanya a favor by calling law enforcement?
Can we approach?
How does she get to ask the question?
Hold on.
That door was open, Judge.
Go
They
ahead,
literally.
sir.
Well, they had called law
the
enforcement
objection.
many times without any sort of relief.
Here's the objection.
And
Approach.
Your Honor, they literally opened the door and propped it open for us. May we please walk through? Now they're trying hard not to let these previous acts in regarding the decedent. They're trying very hard. Some of it has brought up. We've got the Mace incident because we needed that. But this other act's involvement with law enforcement, everybody knew. Everybody in town knew. That's basically what we're hearing here. Oh yeah. Okay, so Anne, on the screen as you see right now next to me, my picture is sort of covering up part of the defense. This lady is absolutely amazing. She is the defense lawyer, and on the right, also in a darker blue suit, that's the prosecutor. And I shouldn't have to tell you this, but the judge is the gentleman with the black mask facing us. And he's the one that's trying to keep these two people from going at each other's throats, because they're really doing it. Let's see if she got to ask this question.
Let me ask a more pointed question. Just to be clear, what you just indicated, you were talking about the Chavez's calling law enforcement numerous times.
Yes.
And was it your understanding that they were calling law enforcement about Mr. Areola?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's it.
Okay, Mr. King, you step down, okay?
Okay,
You careful
so
with that step.
they successfully didn't. She wasn't able to bring the details of those previous law enforcement calls into the court, but everyone knows that he's been a problem. Man, yeah, this is.
Don't you have your next witness available?
We do, Your Honor. The defense would call Aaron Brudenell to the stand.
I heard Aaron. I didn't get the last name, but yeah, all the neighbors watch out for the mace man. The prosecutor wishes she had a can of mace now. Oh man. Oh, is he an expert? Let's see if he's an expert. He's got a binder. He looks like an expert. This is so true, Matthew. This
Good
is a
afternoon,
three-ring
sir.
circus.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, my name is Aaron Brudenell. I can spell that. It's 2 A's, R-O-N, and Brudenell is B-R-U-D-E-N-E-L-L.
I think he's an expert.
And, sir, where are you employed?
I'm currently employed full-time with the Arizona Department of Public Safety in the Crime Laboratory in Tucson
And how long have you been employed with the Arizona Department of Public Safety?
since 2007.
And what do you do for the Arizona Department of Public Safety?
I'm a firearm and tool mark expert.
What are tool marks?
Tool marks essentially are any usually microscopic marks left behind when a tool interacts with some other object. For example, in the firearm context, the tools used to manufacture a firearm typically leave very unique and identifiable marks behind on the firearm, and then subsequently those marks get transferred to fired ammunition. So that type of examination is the type of work a firearm examiner usually does.
And do you have any degrees?
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry and a master's degree in analytical chemistry, which is more focused on the analysis of chemical substances.
Have you ever been sprayed with mace?
And do you have any other educational background?
I do. My firearm and tool mark education, my forensic education for what I do, came from the ATF's National Firearm Examiner Academy. It's a year-long course of study that started in 1999.
That's a pretty good
I was
school.
in the second class, so approximately a dozen students go through a year-long course of study covering all topics in firearm forensics.
What is the ATF?
Oh, ATF is the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They were formerly part of the Treasury Department. Now they're part of the Justice Department.
I've been interrogated by them
All right,
before.
and you indicated
Not
that
fun.
you have a master's degree in analytical chemistry.
Yes.
And when you were obtaining your master's degree, were you a graduate research assistant?
Yes, I was.
And what areas did you study or conduct research in when you were a grad student?
The research I worked on was essentially ion molecule interactions, like mass spectrometers. This is very technical, but the simplest application are when you see the screening devices at the airport where they might run a swab across your luggage or your hand, put into a piece of equipment to analyze for trace substances such as explosives. That's the type of research I was focused on.
And after you obtained your master's degree, where did you first go to work?
My first job in forensics was with the Idaho State Police. I was hired in their crime laboratory in Pocatello, Idaho.
You guys are
Where I
great.
started training and did casework as a toxicologist.
And your casework as a toxicologist, what did that entail?
Largely analysis of urine samples and also testimony, excuse me, let me back up. Largely the analysis of urine samples for substances, controlled substances and other impairing substances and their metabolites. But additionally, I did work with breath alcohol analysis. So that's the type of alcohol analysis that's usually done either in the field or in, say, a police station for testing a person's breath for the level of alcohol intoxication.
And you mentioned that you would also testify in your scope of work.
Yes, I've testified in both those areas before.
And were you testifying as an expert in those areas?
Yes, I was.
And did that work include drugs such as cocaine?
Yes, cocaine is one of the common drugs and its metabolites that we would see routinely in urine samples, for example.
This guy's got some key
And
evidence.
alcohol?
Yes, alcohol as well.
After the Idaho State Police, where did you go?
Once I was at the Idaho State Police, I got my training in firearms and worked cases there. I worked briefly for the Washington State Patrol after that, about a year and a half, and then I moved to Arizona where I worked for the Tucson Police Department in their crime laboratory in the firearm and tool mark section.
Slightly
How
better
long were you at the
credentials.
Tucson Police Department?
About 3.5 years.
And you said you worked in their firearm and tool mark department?
Yes, I did some brief drug chemistry while I was there, but for the most part, I was focused on firearm and tool mark forensics.
And when you're doing firearm and tool mark forensics, what does that entail?
A most common firearm case might be receiving a gun in evidence and examining it for operability, seeing if the safety features function, seeing if it's safe to fire. The next probably more common and less and more complicated analysis would be looking at those test fires under a microscope and then comparing them to evidence that may have been recovered from a scene, such as a fired bullet or a fired cartridge case.
Did your work with the Tucson Police Department include reconstruction of shootings?
To a limited degree, I did reconstruction of shooting incidents at Tucson Police Department, but I would say the bulk of my reconstruction work happened once I moved to my current position at the state.
And did your work at the Tucson Police Department include processing of crime scenes?
Not at that department. I did some crime scene work in the Idaho State Police.
And did you ever testify when you were at the Tucson Police Department?
Yes, I did.
And in what areas were you testifying?
Almost all of my testimony was in either firearm and tool mark work or reconstruction.
And was that as an expert?
Yes, that's correct.
And then where did you move after Tucson Police Department?
Currently, where I currently am at the Arizona Department of Public Safety. Same city, just a different agency, statewide agency, and a different laboratory.
And when did you start with the Arizona Department of Public Safety?
2007.
And what do you do for the Arizona Department of Public Safety? If you could kind of walk us through your career there.
Sure, and it's essentially stayed the same since I started. I work on routine firearm and tool mark cases and do shooting incident reconstruction casework as well. Anything having to do with firearm forensics or a shooting incident, that's what I'm tasked to.
Do you also assist in training employees?
Yes, I do that as part of my job. We'll train sometimes new employees on basic firearm safety and handling, all the way to having, so a new firearm examiner, if they were hired, I might participate in their training as well.
And have you testified as an expert during your time at the Arizona Department of Public Safety?
Yes, many times.
And what areas do you testify as an expert in?
Firearm and tool mark analysis and shooting incident reconstruction.
Do you know how many times you've testified as an expert in those areas?
I do not. We routinely have our testimony reviewed once a year. So I would say with only one exception I can recall, I've testified every year that I've worked there, and usually more often than just once.
Which courts have you testified in as an expert?
I've testified in criminal courts in Idaho, in Washington State, in Arizona, Illinois, Kansas, Colorado, and here in New Mexico. I believe that's the full list. I've also testified in federal courts in some of those jurisdictions too.
And have
So he's
you
an expert.
ever
We get this.
conducted any trainings or taught any classes?
Yes, on a number of occasions I've taught shooting incident reconstruction, for example, and other related coursework. I've done it for different organizations from time to time. National Institute of Justice, West Virginia University, the Arizona Homicide Investigators Association.
Yeah, Clark,
Those are some
they're
of the
doing it
more
wrong.
common ones.
They aren't
Are
following
you
any of the
also an
things DB
instructor
taught.
for the ATF?
Yes, the academy where I attended in 2000, 2001 brought me back as an instructor in 2004.
Have you taught classes on trajectory?
Yes, I've done that type of casework, or classwork in classes involving shooting reconstruction, and I did a specific online class for a group called RTI, which is a research organization and training organization in North Carolina. It was called the Four
Hey.
Elements of Trajectory. So
Shout out to
focused
NC.
on specifically the trajectory aspects of shooting reconstruction.
Have you taught classes regarding firearm evidence for prosecutors?
I have tried, at least. I've done this course that I called Firearm Evidence for Investigators, Attorneys, et cetera, and some prosecutors have participated in that. In one course in particular that was for the Pima County Attorney's Office, we did a firearm forensic specific course.
Have you written any articles or books that have been published?
I have written some articles that have been published, and I've also participated as a co-author in doing research for some other articles as well.
And in what areas have you been published?
Gunshot residue. I'm kind of blanking on some of the others, but the gunshot residue aspects are the most common in my field in terms of stuff that I've published or participated in publishing.
Have you published or participated in articles regarding flash suppressors?
Yes, I did an article that was published in it was a magazine as well as a forensic journal that focused on the relationship between flash hider design and also barrel length and how those interacted.
Have you received specialized or advanced training in any areas?
Yes, a variety. My CV usually lists all of the individual trainings I've received, going into either forensic meetings or specific training I've gotten from specific organizations as well.
And some of that advanced training, would that be in firearm and tool marks?
I would say most of it is either firearm tool mark analysis or related fields such as shooting reconstruction or in some cases other types of pattern analysis.
And advanced training in crime scene analysis?
Yes, I've had some of that as well.
And some advanced training in chemistry?
Yes, I believe so.
And advanced training in toxicology?
It's been a few years, but yes, I've had some training in toxicology as well.
And have you toured any firearm facilities?
Yes, as part of my initial training and continuing on as the opportunities present themselves, I will take advantage of opportunities to tour.
This is routine, this line of questioning when you're
facilities.
establishing an expert
And
witness.
why do you tour those facilities?
Because they're going
A
to
number of
basically
reasons.
ask the
Firearm
court to
facilities
accept
are
him as
useful
an
for
expert
seeing the
here. But
process
that's
of
coming
how guns
soon.
are manufactured. Because we use the manufacturing marks in part to do our job of identifying individual fired bullets and cartridge cases to specific firearms, seeing the process and how they're manufactured is useful. For example, most firearms have a serial number, but it may surprise you to learn that the gun that has the second serial number to the first gun may not have been made at the same time. They make parts in batches, and then the guns are assembled from the parts that are made. So you could have two guns that have the same, similar serial numbers that were made some time apart. That's just one example. Ammunition factories are probably equally useful, but for different reasons, seeing how the manufacturers use the raw materials and assemble them into complete ammunition. Occasionally marks may be left behind that you wouldn't want to confuse for marks that could be used to link a fired cartridge or bullet to a gun. Also, the different manufacturing the different manufacturing technologies and also the different manufacturing processes will show you things that might help you identify the brand of an ammunition or some other important aspect of something that may have been recovered at a shooting incident.
How many facilities have you toured?
I don't recall the numbers I would say in the dozens.
Would that include SIG Arms?
I did tour a SIG Arms facility, I believe in 2000, and it was the facility in Exeter, New Hampshire.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense would tender Mr. Brudenell as an expert in firearm examination and shooting reconstruction.
State? And not toxicologist?
And toxicology.
And Your Honor, I would object to that. Can we approach?
Okay, so they didn't object to the first ones, but they objected to toxicology, which is weird. Toxicology and firearm reconstruction are very different from each other. But he's definitely got the experience and background to, arguably to be deemed an expert in that field for the court's witness, for a court's consideration. Wow. The prosecution's like, Your Honor, we need something. You've got to protect us somehow. We have nothing. Next, he's going to tell us who was on the grassy knoll. He may have been there. He may have seen that. We could be experts now. Definitely, we've watched an expert enough on YouTube that we can probably claim that. The who was it that asked this? Abby. It was said was a police officer on the record as an expert. I think you're talking about the lead investigator. I don't think they tendered him as an expert witness, but they did go into his background and his YouTube certifications. That was funny.
All right, so to be clear then, Mr. Brudenell is qualified as an expert in firearm and tool mark and shooting reconstruction. Okay, thank you, sir.
So they got the toxicology
Brudenell,
eliminated.
have you been provided with any information regarding this case that we're here for today?
Yes, I received a number of documents, photographs, recordings of interviews and transcripts, things of that nature.
And did you review those materials?
I did.
And what was your purpose in reviewing those materials?
Essentially to do what I could to evaluate the evidence available to me in the context of the incident.
Sorry, I didn't realize
And
chat
in
wasn't on
reviewing
screen.
that evidence, did you make note of any items or any investigation that was missing that could have been useful?
There are a number of things that can go into a shooting reconstruction, and if I can pause briefly to elaborate.
Please.
When you do a traditional forensic examination where you offer a firearm or an unknown substance to a crime lab,
Turn it up just a
the
bit.
analysis is fairly simple and straightforward. It may be technically difficult, but it's a straightforward answer that you get at the end of that process. The firearm may be determined to be operable or inoperable, and that'll be listed on a report. The substance may be identified. This is a controlled substance, and it's cocaine, or this is a non-controlled substance, or something of that nature. But a forensic reconstruction is very different. It's interpretive, and what that means is a forensic reconstruction usually involves assembling as much information and data as you can, both from, say, a crime scene and from forensic analysis that happens at the laboratory. And the way I like to describe your result at the end of that process is you have a filter. You have a series of facts and information you can use to sort out different scenarios, to try to decide if one scenario under those circumstances that you've identified is possible or, say, impossible, or if one of those scenarios
Okay,
is
an
more
important
likely.
part for an expert witness is for him to be able to provide information that's usable by the jury. So if he gets too technical in his terminology and they lose him, I mean, he loses them, that'll count against him. So we'll have to watch and see if, I mean, the legal mind might say, yeah, you said everything right, but if the jury doesn't understand it, it's not going to do any good. So he's got to be able to sort of dumb it down to the people who aren't experts in this field.
So in this case, when you reviewed the evidence, this is the evidence that was gathered by Sandoval County Sheriff's Office and the New Mexico State Police. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
I
And
heard
have
her
you
say
ever
cocaine, yeah.
reviewed cases that involved either of those agencies before?
I would say a number of times I have, yes.
And so are you familiar with the work of those agencies?
Somewhat, yes.
And in reviewing the work that was conducted in this case, were there certain areas that you felt there could have been more follow-up done?
Yes, all the
I think
investigation.
there are always going to be other things that could have been done, additional work. And if you're doing the reconstruction, you're trying to answer the questions that are posed to you. But specifically in this case, there were a number of bullet impacts inside the structure and some traveling outside of the structure. Those bullet impacts were photographed and they were labeled, very important parts of the process. In some cases, trajectory rods were placed to indicate the bullet paths as they went through certain structures. But what wasn't done were specific photographs or measurements that would allow you to document the exact trajectories more accurately. And there wasn't, that I saw, a evaluation of the whole scene that included information on bullet trajectories that may be incomplete. For example, a bullet striking the floor at a shallow angle. Some other information that might
For
be
example,
useful is to try to determine
something that
if
happened in
bullet
this case.
struck that flooring and ricocheted, or if it went through the flooring and entered some space underneath the house. Those are the types of information that I would have liked to have seen if possible, and possibly some other information on specific materials, such as what the flooring was made of exactly.
Why would that be helpful, to know what the flooring was made of?
In some cases, you will see different effects depending such on, for example, the thickness of, say, flooring material, or what it's constructed from. In this case, I have a pretty good idea what the flooring is made from, but how thick it is, or other information of what might be below it was lacking.
And you had mentioned impact sites, the different impact sites at the scene.
Yes.
Is there testing that could be done on those impact sites that help you to, I guess, sort of construct that filter that you had mentioned?
Yes, and I was able to do some of that testing.
Okay. And what other types of testing is there? Is there like some kind of chemical testing that could be conducted?
There's, two things in particular. Some chemical testing may be useful. The residues of gunshots that are fired at close distances to objects often leave residues that are, if not visible, can be made visible through chemistry. There's also other things that can be observed, such as physical impacts. Sometimes the residues from a shot that's fired at close range are visible. Sometimes they're not visible, but can be made visible.
If he gets the testimony in there, the defense will use it definitely in the closing, and will simplify it. We'll really just break it down in a way that the jury can really connect with. But some of this is a little bit almost tedious to get through. But he's saying the right things. It's just not.
And why would individual?
It's just not delivered in a way that it feels like he's scoring the points.
What that can give you in some cases is a better estimate of the distance, and in maybe some other cases, the angle at which a shot was fired. Essentially, when a gun is fired, the bullet leaves the barrel at a high speed, but following that bullet out of the barrel are a number of residues, including unburned particles of powder, that are also leaving at approximately the same speed. Now, a bullet does not slow down very fast cutting through air, but small, lightweight particles of powder do. So once you get a certain distance away, those particles of powder will disperse in their area and will also lose velocity, so they don't produce the same kind of impacts. For example, you might be very close to an object and have lots of visible residues. You might be a little farther away and have impacts from these particles that leave small, visible or barely visible damage to that surface. And once you get farther away, sometimes all you have are the particles themselves adhering to the surface. And some of these things can be seen easily. Some of them will take some techniques to visualize. But in any case, that kind of information may help you get an idea for a particular impact, how close or far the gun was, and in some cases even what was the orientation of the firearm in space at the moment that particular shot was fired.
And there's been some discussion in this case regarding gunshot residue analysis. What is that?
Well, there's a couple types. The initial term, gunshot residue, is probably very broad. We use it in forensic contexts usually in two ways. One way would be to identify, say, the distance a shot may have been fired from an object, as I just described. There is another technique that's trace gunshot residue. That's how I describe it. It's looking for particles of residue that are not visible to the human eye on, say, skin or clothing to identify if a person was in the vicinity of a gunshot or participated as a shooter, for example.
And is gunshot residue analysis something that a crime lab can do?
Yes, mostly the former type. The latter type of that trace.
Maybe they can reenact the shooting again, and he could point out where there would be gunshot residue. That would be fun.
The other type is more commonly performed in most modern crime laboratories.
And when you have a gunshot victim who's wearing clothing, and
Yes.
you're trying to determine the distance of the firearm from that person when they were shot, does the gunshot residue analysis assist in that?
It can, and normally what happens in those circumstances are the clothing itself is delivered as evidence to the crime laboratory, and that item of evidence is analyzed by the laboratory for that purpose.
And do you know if the New Mexico Department of Public Safety has the ability to do this type of analysis?
They do.
And did they? No.
What about ejection pattern analysis? What is that?
Ejection pattern analysis takes advantage of looking at the way cartridge cases are ejected from a firearm, typically the distance and the direction they travel. If I hold a firearm and I'm pointing in a certain direction, in more cases than not, the cartridge cases that are fired, if they're ejected from the firearm in a semi-automatic gun, for example, they come out of the gun. They typically go right into the rear slightly, but that's a rough estimate. Every gun and ammunition combination can be a little different. So the value of analyzing the ejection pattern would be to see the distance and maybe the direction of cartridge cases and how they travel through air and where they land.
And does the ejection pattern analysis have some limitations?
So
It does.
So
For one
Debbie,
thing, it's,
you're right. This is a little bit
patterns,
boring,
so
and
you're
Matt
not
pointed
gonna
this out. He's getting the information in that they're probably going to use very effectively on the closing. And you know, as he's testifying to this, he's basically smarter than all the police and investigators on the scene, and so he's going to have an understanding of this that's different than what they have. And say basically, if they had done the investigation properly, they would have seen quite clearly that this, you know, this everything matched up with the story that was told. Bella says, "Hey, all, got a dash. Governor DeSantis just issued state of emergency for 34 counties, including mine here in Fort Myers. Another hurricane. Oh, no, 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 no. Oh, man, Bella, please stay safe. Oh, my goodness. We'll be thinking of you guys. I'll check the map here in a minute. Let me see where that looks, where it's trending. But, oh, man, that's awful."
What I mean by that is the simplest example is if you were firing a gun and the cartridge cases are landing, say, on a grassy field, they will typically land once and not bounce and stay right where they first hit. If, on the other hand, you're standing on a sidewalk or an asphalt or some rigid structure, those cartridge cases will typically hit and then bounce, and they may go a different direction and vary after that point. Lastly, if you're in a confined space, cartridge cases can hit objects in the confined space, hit walls, they tend to bounce around, so the utility of doing this type of work starts to become limited in those conditions.
And while we're talking about casings, as part of your shooting reconstruction, do you look at where casings are found?
Yes, I do take note of that, and if there is some information to be gleaned from that, oftentimes I'll try to incorporate that in my analysis.
And the location of casings, can that also have limitations?
Yes,
And what would those limitations be?
very much the same. We're talking about the same process. If I find casings all in one spot, that's useful if it's an open air shooting scene. On the other hand, if they're in a confined space like a car or a small room, the location of those casings, or at least the specific location within that room, may be of limited value because those casings, like I said,
So Roxanne, we're in a little bit of a boring part.
it would really depend on the
We've got
specifics
we've
of
got
the
an expert,
circumstance.
firearms
What I've
expert
found
on
is
the
unless
stand right now. He knows a lot
in the
about
room or out of the room, confined spaces are usually limited.
the chemicals that would be found on different
And you mentioned
distances
that
from a
you had
gunshot,
reviewed
on
the
clothing,
evidence.
on
Is that correct?
objects around where a gun was fired. He knows a lot about trajectory. He knows a lot about how the gun operates and where the shell casings would be found. So he's provided a bunch of that information, as well as sort of answering the question, you know, would it have helped if New Mexico Crime Lab had done test X or test Y or test Z? And he's saying, yes, it could have, it could have, it could have. And these are things that, to my understanding, they didn't do.
Do you happen to see if there was any testing done of a firearm by the Department of Public Safety in this case?
Yes, there was.
And what kind of testing was done?
Kind of what I described, routine test firing and operability testing was done. I'm remembering mostly the SIG rifle because that's the gun I focused on. Also, the ammunition itself, the fired cartridge cases that were provided, or that were recovered, were compared, and they were also identified to that particular rifle.
Tag, as he's droning on here, Ryan Hall is an unbelievable Weather Channel. It's like a guy like me, sort of broadcasting from home. Like I am with crime, he is with the weather, and he is so much better, too. He's phenomenal. He has connections with people who go out and chase tornadoes and everything. Ryan Hall is a great Weather Channel.
and see what it would tell me about.
Nate Snyder,
firearm
N8
location.
Snyder. It's a hockey boy fan. He's another one. He's a little bit younger and a little bit not quite as polished. But we've got a couple amateur weather guys out there that are just phenomenal. If you like extreme weather on YouTube, they are great and well deserving of your support. Looks like, just check the map, Hurricane Nicole is looking to boomerang across Florida and then actually swing up my direction a little bit, so we might get some rain as well. But, you know, it'll be rain and a little bit of wind by the time it gets here. But, man, Florida has been hit so hard.
We would ask to be able to publish the slides as demonstrative aids to assist the jury in understanding Mr. Brudadell's testing.
Okay, so yes, this is a defense question. They took Matthew's advice and are setting up a demonstrative aid, basically pictures. They're showing the jury pictures now. That'll be a little bit easier to understand based on the crime scene.
Are you going to use your laptop there, or is it the document camera?
I'm going to use the document camera right now.
Okay.
This is a small court. The judge controls everything. I think he sometimes acts as bailiff too.
Here, so I'm not sure.
It's firing up.
Sure.
Okay.
If everyone can see that, I'll begin. This is the firearm and the ammunition from the shooting incident. The rifle, you can see below, I think we've seen it earlier today. It's a SIG model 5.56 rifle. It's very similar to an AR-15 in some respects. It's also different in others. This particular firearm has a 16-inch barrel based on my analysis of the image and similar products. The ammunition is photographed above. The green tip ammunition is a common U.S. military type.
Thanks for that
ammunition.
correction, Kelly.
And it's got a specific bullet weight and usually a head stamp, which is the markings on the back of the cartridge you can see in the circular image below, or to the left, excuse me. And that is LC19. LC stands for Lake City. That's the name of the arsenal that makes the ammunition. And 19 usually refers to the year of manufacture. So that's what you're seeing in this image. I did not have access to this particular firearm or an identical model. And the ammunition I could find was similar, but it was from a different date. So my test equipment that I use for generating test fires will be shown in the next image. So again, the same type of ammunition and also a head stamp that has just a date that's 5 years prior, so LC14. The rifle is an AR-15 rifle with a 16-inch barrel. And more specifically for both firearms, when you look at the next slide.
Those
the
green tip
muzzle
are
device
armor piercing, I
on the front
believe.
of the barrel. This is the device called a flash hider. It's typically designed to reduce the amount of visible flash that's seen when a gun of this type is shot. And both the firearm from the shooting incident and the one I used for testing had a flash hider that has slits only on the upper half of the actual device.
And so to be clear, in this slide that we're looking at, where did you get this photo, the top photo, from?
The top photo is a photo of the firearm that was recovered in this incident. It was shown in, I think, in the box that it was packaged in, and that's just a close-up of that muzzle of that image.
And this photo?
That's one I took at the range in preparation for my test firing.
And the fact that you're not using the exact gun and the exact ammunition, like how does that play into the results?
Well, I would say it adds some extra unknown, and in particular, were I to get a pattern that I felt represented the pattern that I saw, I would only treat that as an approximation.
Yes.
I would not assert with any kind of certainty the exact muzzle to target distance. That's the kind of thing that you would want to have a more precise combination of exact similarities from your testing and the original incident. But for the purposes of this, it was easy to see in the basic format a firearm and how the various patterns change as the angles change, and get a rough approximation of where this firearm would have been at the time those two particular shots were fired.
And so why are we focusing on the flash hider? That was in the last.
The reason the flash hider is important is that because those vents are only on the top half of that circular flash hider, that means that the vents that are going to release those residues that are visible at very close distances are only going to be on the top.
You can
So, for
basically,
example, if I was shooting...
what he's saying by this is he's basically
windows
saying
down
from the
very
burn marks
low,
on the ground when the gun was fired in the
I
ground,
would expect to
you
see
can
those
really
flash
tell
patterns there.
exactly where the gun
I
was
wouldn't expect to
facing,
see them if
which
I
way it
was
was
on the bottom
pointing,
of
like
the
which way was
still
up and
shooting
which
at
way
it
was down, not just
because
where the barrel was,
flash
but the
patterns
orientation of the
would be
gun compared to the
In this case,
the rest of the
patterns that were
room.
seen on the flooring in the shooting incident scene had those patterns on them. What that told me was that rifle was essentially inverted. It was upside down. At some
Green tip's
point,
not armor
the
piercing?
gun was held in the opposite orientation that a normal shooter would hold it, which would be with the grip facing down and the magazine down and those ports upward. In this
Let me
case,
stop you there for a
please.
minute. I would like to actually show you the firearm that's been tagged with evidence.
Very well.
Yeah, I'm showing they meet one of the criteria for the federal definition of armor piercing ammunition, those green tip rounds. That's what I believe they are.
Permission to approach the witness?
You may.
Okay, we're using the gun. We get to reenact.
With your permission, I'd like to verify this is an unloaded gun safe.
Yes, let's please do that.
You just visually see the chamber is empty. There's nothing inside the gun in either the chamber or the magazine area, so this gun has no ammunition in it, so it should be perfectly safe to handle.
Okay. And so this firearm, is this the firearm that you were looking at in the photos?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. And when you're talking about the flash hider, can you please show us what you're talking about?
Yes, right here is the flash hider device, and it may be difficult to see from a distance, but the area on the bottom where the grip and the magazine are is solid. There are no holes on this portion of the flash hider. But on the sides and the top are where those ports exist. The intention of this, I think, initially is to keep the blast going upward rather than going downward. But as a practical effect, if it's fired close to an object that records those those patterns, you can get some indication of the orientation of the firearm in space. And so when I say that the firearm was inverted or upside down, I would approximate, using this as a stand-in for the floor, it was in some sort of orientation approximating angles of this type. So upside down and at some angle this direction, shallow angle. Furthermore, it may have been tilted slightly one way or the other, but for the most part, it was in an upside-down orientation at the time those shots were fired.
This goes right
And is
into
that
his
a
testimony.
typical way to fire a rifle?
Not really.
Should we move on to your next slide?
Sure.
Matthew, you're ruthless.
So these are the two images that were
This is a
taken
defense
by
witness, Debbie.
investigators at the scene. You can't read the label below, but it's items I-11 and I-12. Those are the impacts that are recorded and described in this photograph. If you see the kind of gray-black pattern surrounding those impacts, there is a close pattern
Yes,
which
it
has
is.
sort of just a parabolic shape to it. But then farther away are the individual little patterns that correspond to those open ports on the flash hider. If you look at I-12, which is the lower one, you can see 3 of them. And if you look at I-11, you can see 2. What I found interesting was also that the distance between the actual impact site, the damage physically done to the floor, and where that cone of residues appears, they kind of just overlap. Right about the time the bullet impact starts is right about the time that that larger pattern starts to dissipate.
Should we move on to the next one?
Yes, please.
So now, we had talked about your testing that you had done in this case. Does this show some of your testing?
Yes, it does. So to approximate this on the range, I got samples of similar type of flooring material, and I set them up using a vise and another apparatus with some clamps to put them in at a specific angle. Now, as I said, the images from the scene show the gun being held upside down, but it's very impractical to do that in a range, and this was a much easier way to reproduce angles and patterns. So, for example, this particular image that you see on the left shows a side view where you can see the ports in the upper half of the muzzle device, and the structure that's being fired at is at approximately a 45-degree angle, where I could actually use a
This
scale
is something
below
the jury's
or
going to
direct
understand.
measurements to see how far away that particular
And
flash
obviously,
hider
this is
was
not the
from
sort of thing you want to
surface of the
replicate.
wood.
He's an expert and knows
The
this.
other
He's
image is just
intentionally
a view
causing a
from
ricochet
behind,
at close range to the
approximately where
gun.
the shooter would be standing, observing how this testing was done.
Let's see what the burn mark looks like
next
once he
slide
takes the
forward,
shot
please.
here.
So this shows 4 of those test samples, and the one that was the first one done would be in the upper right, and that was at 45 degrees and at a distance about 3 inches. And so that's essentially what had more or less in the photograph you saw before. And at that distance and at that angle, I was not able to visualize any of those muzzle patterns. So none of that dark, sooty shapes that showed the location or the distance. There were other visible patterns, and they might be something you can see in there. There's small light specks around the area of the bullet impact.
And you can touch the screen and actually.
Thank you. That's that sort of zone where those individual particle impacts are striking the surface of the wood and producing slight damage. These can be visible in photography, but may not be visible in all cases. So at 3 inches, this thing was close enough to still do some tiny microscopic damage to the surface that could be evaluated for the purposes of distance.
Charlie, that was bizarre.
The other samples, when compared, I felt that the one at the bottom left, the contact shot where the muzzle is actually in contact with the surface and the angle is 20 degrees, most approximated the residues I saw. So you have that pattern that, as I said, the dark pattern that starts to dissipate at the spot where the bullet.
So Shane, we had the
Bullet
lead
starts.
investigator
So right in here, you have
in
the
his
pattern
expert
dissipating.
training
You also have the bullet
list
impact
that he
starting
watched
there.
internet
And then you have the
videos
individual,
or took
in this
internet
case,
courses
4
on things.
visible
It was
patterns
we implied that it
of
was
the actual
YouTube,
residues
but
themselves.
yeah, crazy stuff.
This one up above has 3 that I can see. Apologize for that. This one also has several. But what you'll notice with this one also has several.
Not sure
But
why
what
it's
you'll
dropping
notice
out
with
there.
this one and with this one, the location of that sort of central residue pattern isn't at the same relative location. Now, I wouldn't feel comfortable ruling out these other 2 possibilities based on the differences that we described. The firearm is a different firearm with some different properties, and the ammunition is slightly different based on a difference of 5 years of manufacturing. So I wouldn't swear that any of these are absolutely accurate as far as determining the distance. But as you can see, for the most part, you have to be fairly close, in my test set, under 3 inches, and contact being fairly reliable. And you have to have the firearm in an orientation where those ports are producing marks, individual marks, that show that the gun was essentially upside down at the time.
Next slide.
Please.
So all the boring part just lays the foundation for him
So to try to
explaining
reproduce
this.
these specific samples, I used a firearm, that same firearm, in an orientation in a contact position.
We could do like a highlights reel. We're having internet issues. I've shut down the live stream on Facebook just to keep it clear, but it's still acting up a little bit. Let's see here. Seems to be on the feed channel. Let me switch to here. Give me a second while we get that sorted out. I'm keeping an eye on it here. Let me shut down anything else that's running that might be slowing us down. Okay. Let's get rid of that one there. Oh, there I am. Still nothing. Okay. It's on every feed, yeah. So it's not us, because I'm seeing other feeds that are still active. So it's coming in from somewhere else. Wow. So yes, who's in charge of the internet today? Well, we actually swapped out a little bit earlier, and I think it went to. Oh, I don't know who got it. hopefully you guys remember. Who was it that got it this time? I forgot. Whose job was it to track that? Yes, it is interesting testimony. We're just waiting for the feed to come back, because he's going to show us through his testing that he can replicate the same evidence that they found at the scene, and using the replication methods, he can say this is how the gun was held, or this is how you would have to, how this would have to happen for this to be possible. And doing that, it's going to match up, because this is a defense witness, it's going to match up perfectly with the story that Dean shared this morning as he recounted. It hadn't even acted out, which is bizarre, I know. Yes, he acted out this with the prosecution acting as the decedent, Mr. Maceface, whatever his name was.
You ready for the next slide?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
So this is a defense witness.
And again, this is just close-up photographs of those 2 test shots that you just saw after they were produced with a scale and showing the direction of the shot travel. And these, like I said, approximate what was seen at those 2 shots, impact 11 and 12, at the scene. Next.
Mac, you're right.
What are we looking at here?
So this is a view from, I believe, a Google Earth or Google Map of the site. Or in this case, no, I correct myself. I believe that's an aerial view that was taken by investigators at the scene. This particular area, in the highlighted area, the red zones, the rectangles.
Mac, the ports are circular. Turn it 180 degrees. Don't buy it. Only the top half of the gun has ports. So those the gas ejection ports on the side of that little muzzle flash suppressor type thing, they only come out the top and the sides. They don't go out the bottom. So if there's a burn mark next to a gun residue, it'll show which side, the top or the where the gun was turned because of that. That's what they're getting at.
That tries to approximate the location and the angles and the directionality of that particular shot. There were 3 going through the interior door between the mudroom and the hallway. Those are the ones in the center circle in green. And there were also 3 that went through the exterior wall, and I believe a heating or some other unit that was in its path. So the individual photographs you can see to the right and above in this diagram image. Now the trajectory rods were placed, giving sort of a rough estimate of where the shots passed through and at what approximate angles. They weren't measured, though, at least not that I could tell. And the photographs weren't of particular angles that were useful for taking measurements, because sometimes you can take measurements directly off a photo.
Yeah, they completely.
If the photograph is done in a precise
they
way.
stuck the rods in the holes and
thing
took
that is
pictures and called it
lacking
good,
and
but
may
they
or may
didn't
not
do
have
any
been
measurements.
Determinable is whether or not those 3 shots going through the door are also the same 3 shots that went through the wall. Bullets can travel through a number of structures. The next images show the actual impacts through the door itself. And it's a bit of a close-up showing the shots as they are going into the door from the inside, heading outwards. And in this case, if you look, you can see that the holes through the actual door itself, those holes are not round. The holes indicate sort of an oval shape. And what that tells me is at the moment these shots all struck this door, they were likely destabilized by one of 2 possibilities. Either something in the relationship of the firearm that's not properly stabilizing the bullets, such as the incorrect twist of rifling or something like that, some defect, or these bullets may have struck some other surface on their way. These might be continuations of other impacts that hit the hallway and then ricocheted off the flooring. At this point, I can't say either way.
What are we looking at here?
So this is a view of that hallway, and what I'll point out, and we'll see, I think I have a better view of it as well, but there's another shot here. The 3 shots that we just saw going through the doorway are all through here. And you can't see them in this image because they're blocked by the door wall. But the one through the actual corner itself that you can see has a trajectory rod through it. And there are additional impacts that are marked and labeled on the floor. You can see several of them here. And those shots were identified and marked and individually photographed. My next process was to look at those individual photographs. Since I couldn't see any residues, I wanted to see if the shape of the bullet impact gave me any information on directionality. Now, there's two types of directionality measurements you can get for most bullet paths. There's what we call elevation angle, which just means how upward or downward is that bullet path relative to gravity. And the second thing is what we would call an azimuth or
You're
a
good, Mac.
horizontal.
Any questions? Good. Glad we can help
Which is
out.
what you would see if you were looking straight down, and that was what I was more focused on. That angle, that visual top-down view, would give an indication of which direction through the structure these bullets were flying. And if they were hitting at a shallow angle, I could see that. If they were hitting at a steeper angle, they would be more difficult to determine because that shot would not, it'd be closer to a round hole rather than a linear hole that would point in the direction of bullet travel.
And why is that important in this case?
Well, in this case, I think there was some question about whether or not there was a struggle. And one of the things that I thought lent itself to a struggle, besides the orientation of a firearm leaving those residue patterns we already discussed, would be a very shallow impact. You know, somebody firing a gun very low to the ground. Unless you're lying prone in a deliberate fashion, that might also be indicative of shots fired during a struggle while the gun is being forced away from somebody and held low.
Are we done with this slide?
Yes.
What are we looking at here?
So,
So this is inside that room,
In,
looking at slightly different angle.
me
This
turn
shows
this down here just for a
additional
minute.
impacts. These are the ones we've already discussed, 11 and 12.
so when we got a new
Some other
couch,
impacts here.
the old couch has to be disposed of, and we're doing that right now. And the person who's taking the old couch
But
is
also showing the location
is-
in that room where these
is
individual
plowing our yard
were.
with their car.
And as you'll start to
So I'm
see
going to have to step
once
away
I look
just
at the
for a minute.
diagram,
I'm going to keep this running here. I'll be back. Give me
impact
2
is
minutes.
going
If
in
somebody
this
can
direction.
just man the bench and keep
11,
chat behaving
12,
while I'm gone.
next to it, which is
I'll be right back
number
here.
10, but it's in my
I'll
diagram.
leave the camera on here and just run away.
To your next
You didn't
slide,
see
though.
anything.
The location of impact sites 10, 11, and 12, was that interesting to you, or does that say anything to you?
Yes. It's easier to see when you get the whole diagram, but the bulk of the trajectories were at least going this direction down the hallway, but these were running in a very different direction. These were more or less parallel. Yeah, that's probably good. The red arrows are indicating what my finger is doing a mediocre job of drawing. The red arrows show the indications of where these individual impacts were and what their angles were relative to a bird's eye view. So we have multiple trajectory angles illustrated here. What's almost as interesting are these impacts that I can't make that determination because they were fired at a steeper angle. And again, if the firearm is fired downward at a steeper angle, that may also be indicative of some kind of struggle for the gun because there's not a reason to do that short of maybe a warning shot or something of that nature or an accident.
And what about impact 14?
14 parallels going down the hallway. That's at a slightly different angle than the ones that appeared to be going through the door and also exiting the structure with the purple trajectory rods in some of the previous slides. But other than that, I can't comment more than just that kind of angle.
So how many different directions do we have bullets flying at this scene?
I would say there are, it's unknown at this point. There are at least, if you want to simplify and keep 14, 9, and these 8 with the arrow all together with the group that are going through the door and the group that are going out the side of the wall, all those could be roughly described as a direction that way. But there's going to be some variation. But this group, this cluster, all appears to be going 90 degrees from them. And in particular, other impacts without that kind of directionality that I could determine from photographs could be in a totally different direction if for no other reason they're not being fired at a shallow angle to make ricochet or slight shallow impacts on the floor.
Okay, so that was worse than I thought. My yard is a mess.
So once you consider three dimensions, I would say
Yes, I'm outside saying there are people on the internet waiting for me. Sorry, I left the audio down on them as well. I apologize for that.
Fall into.
And
They had a truck with a U-Haul trailer driving back and forth trying to run over one of our trees, and
What that tells me is
we'll probably need to re-landscape our yard after that.
Struggle
But
for the firearm, because a deliberate attempt to shoot at those angles doesn't really make any sense. If people are fighting over a gun and it's going off in the process, that would help go a long way to explain different trajectory angles and also different vertical angles and even different orientations where the gun's upside down.
think we had
and in contact with the
14.
floor. That's a very unusual angle, and I felt that was the most compelling.
Okay, and we're talking about those impact sites with the scorch marks that you tried to replicate in your testing.
That's correct.
I mean, is that something
no,
you
it
see
was,
a lot?
it was a
in
lady. I
shooting
just
reconstruction?
helped her steer.
I would say not often. And,
I stood in front of her car,
see things like
and
that.
I
Sometimes
told her
you'll
which
see
way to
muzzle
turn
flash,
the steering wheel and go back and
firearm
forward,
has
and
to have a muzzle
was
device
able to steer her backwards so she could just watch me and I could steer her with her trailer because she.
during the shooting event
Yeah.
where it could
Abby, he was shot twice. A bullet. There's bullet wounds that they're entrance and exit wounds, I believe. But
aspects I wanted to focus on were the ones through the body.
we'll have to go back and pull that
There were 2
information.
wounds to the decedent, one to the head and then one to the chest. Both were described by the medical examiner as top to bottom, right to left. So if you're seeing me passing through me in this direction, as well as in the diagram, but no front or backward orientation. So these projectiles are essentially slicing straight through at this type of angle. That's an unusual angle. If someone were shot while they were standing below a shooter, that would make sense. But in this case, given the likelihood of a shooter being in a position that's on or near the ground, that body would have to be pivoted in such a way at the waist that it is point oriented mostly in that level. So bent at the waist, pointed, if not forward, slightly to the left of the shooter's position if both of those were produced at the same instant.
Yeah,
Now, I
this
can't
directly
sequence the
counters
shots.
the
I
lead
can't say that
investigator's
the 2
theory
shots
that
through the
he was
body
turning
or the
and
3rd shot I
trying to
described
dive out the
was
door
a
for
great
safety
shot
when he
we'll
was
show
shot.
you in a moment. I can't say those were fired simultaneously or all at the same time, but that seems to be the most likely scenario based on the location where the body fell and was found.
And Mr. Cummings was testifying today, is that correct?
Yes, I was.
And you heard his description of what happened,